Hello, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walden University with a joint faculty appointment with Ross University School of Medicine. In this video, I wanted to go over an important malady in our society which persists, and that is rape. And what this is it's a bit dated. It's about 5 years old. In fact, now it's 6 years old. From 2022, 2016. This is from, and some of the patterns that are quite intriguing here is that Alaska always, and in fact, this is not just true for 2016, but persistently is a higher place for rape than any other state in the country. You do have some pockets, for instance, Arkansas, New Mexico, and then Colorado. These are three noteworthy states where there's higher rates. And then some of the yellow states are very low rape rates. And I want to make a note here that this is per 100,000 inhabitants. So any of these values, for instance, this value seems higher, and it is, but it's higher in comparison to other states. So the rape rate, I believe, is as high as, I believe this is Norway. And then in the United Kingdom, one portion has a higher rate of rape. So there's some of these pockets where there's higher rates. France, not so much, but we still expect lower. And but Spain and Portugal have very low rates. So does Italy, and some of these other states. In fact, here it's even less. Some of these European countries. So this is an overview of what is going on. So one point to make is that the rate of rape is much higher among high-income countries, much higher within the United States and some countries in Europe than most other high-income countries. One good observation to make. So, and we can see other types of maps which show and reflect something similar. I wanted to also post and talk about this site that actually a bunch of lawyers put together, but it's pretty comprehensive. And I wanted to go over some of the highlights here. And this was actually from Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. That's what it stands for. And the statistic is this: just digest this for a second. Every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes, get this, and every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. This is tragic. Something that needs to be done. When it's contextualized in terms of time, then epidemiological measures make more sense. From 2000 to 2019, an average of 91,770 sexual assaults in the United States. The true number is likely much, much higher. In fact, the Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates that an average of 355,569 sexual assaults occurred during that time frame. So that shows that vast majority of the sexual assaults are not reported. Now, this actually breaks rape statistics down by year. And what I like about this graphic is that even though it talks about the actual stats, the reported cases on the left, there's a way to determine some of the estimated cases. What is interesting is that the estimated cases in 2018 were way higher than the estimated cases in 2019. I'm not sure why, but there was a discrepancy there. But what is noteworthy as well is that the reported cases of rape were higher here than any other year. So that may have something to do with estimated cases. Now, again, most of them are unreported, so it's hard. It's good to keep that in mind. So FBI reported rape cases versus NCVS estimated sexual assaults. So the sexual assaults, there's two different rape cases FBI reported. So 2019, as you can see, 2018 did see high numbers of rape and high numbers of sexual assault. And this may have been the reason that we saw that estimated spike. So FBI's uniform crime reporting, that is something that is a major source of information. And then National Crime Victimization Survey, that is another source of wonderful information. So Bureau of Justice Statistics and CVS. So if we look at an estimated 101,151 rape cases during 2018, using the legacy definition for rape, it's the highest number since 1994. However, what happened was in 2013, and this is important to know, the FBI revised the definition of rape to include any penetration, no matter how slight. And this change in definition made a difference. So it doesn't necessarily have to be complete penetration. It can be a slight penetration of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. So what's important to note here that the more specific the definition, and as time evolves, some of these definitions change. So that from this new definition, the number of rape cases in 2018, and I think I went over this, was 139,380. If we look at the age, the highest number, and this is tragic too, the highest number of estimated sexual assault and rape cases for ages 12 and older were reported in 2018. So in 2018, 734,632 sexual assault and rape cases were reported. Now, 650,676 were female, 81,956 were male cases. Another point that I want to note is that due to stigma behind male sexual assault and rape, these are, I would suspect, even more underreported. So the reported number of sexual assaults committed by students, for instance, K through 12, was 17,000 from 2011 to 2015. That's a considerable amount when you're talking about students going in K through 12. So this is important and interesting, tragic. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 995 perpetrators will walk free. It's such an underreported crime. Actually, 20 years ago, had a lecture in med school when I first got introduced to the complexities of understanding sexual abuse and rape. So a majority of the perpetrators are not held accountable for the crimes they have committed. According to Rain, out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, and we already said that 995 walk free. Some of the other additional information, only 230 of those sexual assaults are reported to law enforcement. So most are not. From those, 46 reports led to arrest, 9 cases got sent to prosecutors, 5 cases will lead to felony conviction, and less than 5 rapists will be incarcerated. Um, uh, how law enforcement deals with rape is even more tragic than what occurs. Well, it's just as tragic as what occurs during the rape. Only 2 to 8% of sexual assaults are falsely reported. So, what happens when sexual assault is reported? Um, and I was going over some of those stats early on. Um, of course, one myth is that sexual assaults are usually false, but that's only true for 2 to 8%. Um, let's break it down here. Sexual assault. When this happens, about 72% do get arrested. Um, but then 14% prosecuted, felony conviction 8%, and incarceration rates are only 6%. So here's a study, and this is interesting. I'm not going to go over this whole page because there's a lot of interesting information which you can go over on your own. But in a study on sexual abuse, 73% of child victims did not disclose the abuser when the abuser was a relative or a step-parent, and 70% did not reveal the abuser when it was an acquaintance. So more than 60% of child victims do not disclose the abuse during childhood because they fear their safety or experience feelings of shame and guilt as a result of the abuse. Then the question arises, what is considered consent? Um, so consent is an affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement. Consent is, in one instance, doesn't imply consent in the next. Every situation and sexual encounter is unique. And when you have the absence of word no, is not the same as saying yes. A lot of times, individuals may be unconscious, asleep. They may be even underage to be able to give consent, or unable to give consent. Only 27% of women and 19% of men, according to a Planned Parenthood survey, said that consent had to be given at every step in a sexual encounter. By definition, rape is a forced act, and yet a study shows that nearly a third of college men admitted to using force to get a woman to have sex with them, never perceiving it as rape. Researchers explain that men may perceive a woman's no less as a lack of consent and more as resistance that falls in line with stereotypical gender norms, such as the myth of playing hard to get. Um, Understanding the difference between victim versus perpetrator versus understanding what the nuances are is extremely important. Some of the definitions and shocking statistics are rape. The victim knew the perpetrator 80% of the time. Child sexual abuse, the child victim knew the abuser 93% of the time. College campuses, the victim knew the perpetrator 90% of the time. And then date rape is 10% of women are sexually assaulted by an intimate partner. We typically have this notion that there's this scary guy waiting to jump out of the bushes as you walk home alone. Not that it's someone that we respect, someone who has immense talent, or someone who is a leader in our community, because that would force us to face the reality that this happens all the time and it's all around us. We can't necessarily protect ourselves in the way that we want, but understanding and providing awareness is important. So 9 out of 10 victims of rape are female, and this has been belabored in multiple places. In terms of college women 18 through 24, they're 3 times more likely to experience sexual assault than any other age. 18 to 24 not enrolled in college, in fact, are 4 times as much of being raped than women of any other age. Now, women in the military, they're more likely between the ages of 17 through 24 to be victimized, according to the Department of Defense. And then women who identify as gay, bisexual, or lesbian are more at risk of sexual assault. Sexual assault and trauma are quite difficult to deal with. Child sexual abuse is also very destructive. It oftentimes forces individuals, as they become survivors, and they suffer lifelong consequences throughout the life course. So it's tragic. Survivors of child sexual abuse often blame themselves for what happened and take personal responsibility for the abuse. They internalize their feelings and develop a negative self-image, self-destructive thoughts, and other mental health issues and medical concerns, including depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, body issues, eating disorders, disturbed sleep patterns, and even pelvic pain. The economic burden is also very, very costly throughout the victims' lifetimes. Medical costs, 1.2 trillion. Criminal justice costs, 234 billion. But the biggest cost comes from loss of productivity, and that is 1.6 trillion. So if you total up all of these amounts, the economic burden of sexual assault of victims' lifetime is actually $3.1 trillion. So looking at kind of the breakdown of victims under the age of 18, the vast majority are between the ages of 12 to 17. That's 66%. And in fact, tragically, 33% are under 12 years of age. This is a very tragic pie chart, but perpetrators' relation to child, and this is shocking in itself as well. Close to 60%, 59% were acquaintances. And then 34% were family members. Only 7% were strangers. And I think that is the most important: strangers versus acquaintances versus family members. And the notion is that most of them are strangers, and that's not the truth. So it could be individuals that are recognized gym team doctors, the Catholic Church priest. It could be a college coach, and there's known cases in bishop accountability in terms of clerics abuse of minors, and there's specific places where I think ways to explain this, and not always easy to explain. But Larry Nassar was a doctor who treated the U.S. national gymnastics team for 2 decades. He used his profession to violate young girls, often in plain sight. The parents of the patients were sometimes in the same room when it happened, but no one suspected he would do something like that. After an appointment with Nasser, one of his patients, a 13-year-old named Kaylee, told her mom that Nasser had done something that made her uncomfortable. She told her mom he touched her down there. Her mom doesn't know how to respond. And the whole time you're what she's saying, but you're trying to rationalize that it can't be that. But Kaylee's instincts were right. She knew what didn't feel right on her body for her body, and she told her parent. Um, this is a very earth-shattering but important case study to understand because there's multiple moving parts that need to be understood. Now, did the place have some sort of rape kit? Was it something? Was that something that was needed in this situation? And then also, it's important to have proper sex education. What is tragic is that there's only a handful of states where sex education is required. But the fact is that individuals need to be, and children need to be aware as they season into adolescence what their body parts are and education surrounding that. But for instance, the state that I reside in, Pennsylvania, does not have required sex education. Sexual assault on campus is not uncommon. In the military, women make up only 20% of the military service members today, but are targets of 63% of sexual assaults. Again, tragic. Women at lower ranks and younger ages are most at risk of victimization. Um, the problem is the military today, even though there's more women, the culture is still hyper masculine. And this culture is what prevails. The top down structure also makes it difficult, almost impossible, to question authority. This can unintentionally normalize sexual assault. Women make up only 20% of the military service members today, but are targets of 63% of sexual assaults. And this is what I just read. But again, there's a lot of good statistics about that. Individuals with intellectual disabilities are likely to become victims of sexual assault at rates more than 7 times those of people without disabilities. According, again, important important statistic. The Me Too movement in 2017 started and almost went viral. And then more currently, information about 94% of the women in the entertainment industry reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment or assault. So according to a USA Today survey, 94% of women in the and we just went over that statistic. Again, sexual assault in prison is something of a reality. Victim blaming. Sexual assault happens because of a deeply rooted belief system. In their belief system, they hold values that they can exhibit this power and control over another human being, that they are entitled to do that, that they have the right to do that. Where do belief systems start? They start at a really young age. So sexual assault and media, sex education today, and this is what is tragic. This is the map I was telling you about, where, for instance, Pennsylvania, New York, majorly populated states with majorly populated cities have said no to sex education. And this is tragic because sex education is one solution to understanding when something inappropriate like rape takes place, what to do. Again, prevention and education is key. Educating kids from a young age on how to prevent. And then this ends with some resources for survivors of sexual assault. This wraps up many different components of rape and sexual assault. We began with the map, which showed the distribution of rape within the United States, highlighting Alaska and some of the European countries. And then we moved on to explaining some of the alarming statistics, and then finally ending with the map showing areas where there are regulated sex education and places where sex education is not mandatory. So that sums it up. Thank you for listening.